Hello there, gentle souls, and welcome to the sleepy brain, where science becomes poetry and wonder finds its way into dreams. Tonight, we're going on a journey that stretches across millions and millions of years, a story so beautiful and unlikely that it feels like something whispered by the wind through ancient trees. We're going to discover how the mighty dinosaurs, those incredible creatures that once walked this very earth beneath our feet, slowly, gently, beautifully became the birds that sing outside your window each morning. If this peaceful voyage brings you calm, or if you find yourself drifting along with curiosity and wonder, I'd be grateful if you let me know with a gentle like. And perhaps you'd like to join our little community of dreamers and thinkers. Now settle in, let your breathing slow, and let's begin this soft journey through time. Because somewhere between the first tiny feather and the first sweet song lies one of nature's most magical transformations. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine you're standing in a forest. But not any forest you've ever seen. This forest existed 150 million years ago, when the world was warmer, when flowers had not yet learned to bloom, and when the air hummed with sounds unlike anything we hear today. The trees around you are tall and ancient, like gentle giants reaching toward a sky painted in shades we can barely imagine. Ferns unfurl like nature's own scrolls, and the ground beneath your feet is soft with moss and fallen leaves that have been composting for countless seasons. In this ancient quiet, something moves through the underbrush. Not the heavy, earth-shaking footsteps you might expect from a dinosaur, but something lighter, more delicate. Through the dappled shadows steps a creature about the size of a house cat, with a long tail that sways like a feathered ribbon behind it. Its name is Archaeopteryx, and it carries within its small body one of the most beautiful secrets in the history of life on Earth. You see, this little creature is both dinosaur and bird, living in that magical space between what was and what would become. Its teeth are sharp like its dinosaur ancestors, and its hands have claws for climbing. But covering its body, like a soft blanket woven by time itself, are feathers. Real feathers, delicate and perfect, catching the filtered sunlight as it moves through this prehistoric world. Archaeopteryx doesn't know it, but it's living at the very heart of one of evolution's most tender transformations. It can fly, but not like the birds you know today. Its flight is more like a gentle glide from tree to tree, wings catching the air like leaves dancing on an autumn breeze. It's learning what it means to leave the ground, to trust the sky, to become something that its ancestors could never have imagined. Now let's drift back even further in time, like floating on a river that flows backward through the ages. Picture the world 65 million years before. Archaeopteryx, when dinosaurs ruled the earth in all their magnificent variety. Some were giants that made the ground tremble with each step, their necks reaching toward the sky like living bridges between earth and heaven. Others were small and quick, darting through the undergrowth with bright, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Among these smaller dinosaurs were the theropods, the group that would eventually give birth to birds. They walked on two legs, their bodies balanced perfectly as they moved through their world. Their bones were hollow in places, making them lighter than you might expect, as if nature was already dreaming of flight. Their hands had 3 fingers, perfect for grasping, and their hearts beat with the steady rhythm of creatures built for life in motion. These early theropods didn't have feathers yet, but they had something even more important. They had the blueprint, the genetic whisper that would someday bloom into the gift of flight. Evolution, you see, doesn't work like magic, appearing all at once. It works like a painter who adds layer upon layer to a canvas, each small change building upon the last, creating something beautiful and surprising and perfect in its own time. The first feathers didn't appear for flying at all. They came as nature's own soft quilts, helping these ancient creatures stay warm when the sun went down and the world grew cool. Picture a small dinosaur, perhaps the size of a chicken, covered in simple, downy feathers that trapped warm air close to its skin. These feathers were like whispered promises of what was to come, though the creatures wearing them had no way of knowing the sky was calling to them. As millions of years passed, like pages turning slowly in the world's most patient book, some of these feathers began to change. They grew longer, more complex, with intricate patterns that caught the light. Some scientists believe these more elaborate feathers were for showing off, like peacocks do today, helping dinosaurs find their perfect mates by displaying their beautiful plumage in ancient courtship dances. But nature, in her infinite creativity, found another use for these beautiful feathers. As theropod dinosaurs began to run faster, chasing prey or escaping danger, their longer feathers caught the air. At first, it might have been just a small lift, a tiny moment of feeling lighter on their feet. But that small advantage was enough. The dinosaurs who could run and leap just a little better, who could catch just a bit more air, were the ones who survived and had babies of their own. And so, generation by generation, leap by leap, the gift of flight began to whisper its way into being. It wasn't a sudden transformation, but a gentle becoming, like the way dawn slowly brightens the sky, or the way a flower takes its time to bloom. The dinosaurs didn't decide to become birds. Instead, they found themselves slowly, beautifully, inevitably becoming something new, something that could touch the sky and make it their home. Picture yourself now drifting through time like a leaf carried on a gentle stream, moving forward through millions of patient years. The world around us is changing, slowly and softly, like watercolors bleeding into one another on wet paper. The climate grows cooler in some places, warmer in others. New flowers begin to bloom for the first time in Earth's history, painting the landscape in colors that had never existed before. And in this slowly shifting world, the descendants of those early feathered dinosaurs are learning new ways to live, new ways to move, new ways to be. Some of these creatures have discovered that their feathers can do more than keep them warm or help them show off to potential mates. They've learned that by spreading their arms wide and catching the wind just right, they can glide from tree to tree like living kites. It's not true flight yet, but it's something magical nonetheless. Imagine watching one of these early gliders as it launches itself from a high branch, its feathered arms stretched wide, floating through the dappled forest light like a dream learning to fly. These gliding dinosaurs, with names like Microraptor and Anchiornis, lived their lives between the earth and sky. They were about the size of ravens, with long feathers on both their arms and their legs, creating 4 wings instead of 2. Their feathers shimmered with colors we can only guess at, perhaps deep blues and greens that caught the ancient sunlight like scattered jewels. They moved through their world with a grace that belonged neither fully to the ground nor to the air, but to that magical space in between. As we float further through time, we begin to see how nature, in her infinite patience and creativity, was slowly solving the puzzle of flight. It's not an easy puzzle, you see. To truly fly, a creature needs so many things to work together perfectly. Strong chest muscles to power the wings, light, hollow bones that won't weigh the body down, a heart that can pump fast enough to fuel such demanding work, eyes sharp enough to navigate through three-dimensional space, and perhaps most importantly, a brain clever enough to coordinate all these complex movements without having to think about each one. The dinosaurs who would become birds were blessed with many gifts that made flight possible. Their hollow bones had evolved long before flight, originally to make them lighter and faster runners. Their keen eyesight had developed for hunting, helping them spot the tiniest movements in grass and leaves. Their quick reflexes had been honed by millions of years of catching prey and avoiding becoming prey themselves. It was as if nature had been collecting all the right tools, waiting for the perfect moment to put them together in a new and wonderful way. And then, somewhere around 100 million years ago, in forests and wetlands scattered across the ancient world, true flight began to bloom like flowers opening to the sun. The first real birds were still small, still carrying many reminders of their dinosaur heritage. They had teeth instead of beaks, and their wings still bore claws that they used for climbing. But they could fly, really fly, with strong, steady wing beats that could carry them wherever they needed to go. One of these early birds was called Confucius ornis, a creature about the size of a crow that lived in what is now China. It had a beautiful crest of feathers on its head and a tail that ended in two long, elegant plumes that streamed behind it like ribbons in the wind. Some had these long tail feathers, others didn't, and scientists believe this difference might have been between males and females, each beautiful in their own way. Confucius ornis could perch on branches with feet that looked remarkably like those of modern birds, wrapping their toes around twigs with the same gentle grip that sparrows use today. But perhaps the most touching thing about these early birds was how they cared for their young. Fossil evidence shows us parent birds sitting on their nests, their bodies curved protectively over their eggs, just like robins and wrens do in gardens today. The instinct to nurture, to protect, to give life the best possible start had carried forward through all those millions of years of change. The fierce love of a parent for their children connected these ancient birds to every bird that would ever exist, an unbroken chain of caring that stretches from the deepest past to the present moment. As more time passed, like seasons turning slowly into years, the birds began to diversify and spread across the world. Some grew larger, some smaller. Some learned to swim and dive, their wings becoming flippers that could push them through water as gracefully as through air. Others became runners, their wings shrinking as their legs grew strong and swift. The sky became filled with different kinds of flight, from the steady soaring of early eagles to the quick, darting movements of the first hummingbird ancestors. The world itself was changing too. The great age of giant dinosaurs was coming to an end, not all at once, but gradually, like a long, slow sunset. Some dinosaurs grew smaller, adapting to a world that was becoming cooler and more seasonal. Others found new ways to live, new foods to eat, new places to call home. And through it all, the birds continued to evolve and spread, their songs beginning to fill the morning air with melodies that would echo through all the ages to come. It's beautiful to think that during this time of great change and uncertainty, when so much of the old world was fading away, the gift of flight was being perfected and polished like a precious stone. The birds were learning not just to fly, but to master the air in ways that would have seemed impossible to their earthbound ancestors. They were becoming living poems written on the wind, carrying within their hollow bones and beating hearts the entire history of life's long journey from the ground toward the stars. Now let us drift forward through time once more, like drifting on a warm current that carries us gently toward a moment that changed everything. We're approaching 66 million years ago, a time that scientists call the end of the Cretaceous period. The world was lush and green, filled with flowering plants that painted the landscape in colors bright and soft. Giant dinosaurs still walked the earth, their footsteps creating pathways through forests of ferns and early oak trees. And high above them, birds were becoming masters of their aerial world, their wings carrying them over vast landscapes that stretched to every horizon. But the universe, in its mysterious way, was preparing to write a new chapter in Earth's story. High above our planet, invisible in the star-filled darkness of space, an asteroid was traveling on a journey that had begun millions of years earlier in the cold, distant reaches of the solar system. This space rock, about 6 miles across, was hurtling toward Earth at a speed almost impossible to imagine, carrying with it the power to change everything. When this cosmic visitor finally reached our world, it struck with a force that shook the very foundations of the planet. The impact created a crater more than 100 miles wide, throwing dust and debris high into the atmosphere, blocking out the sun like the world's heaviest curtain. The sky grew dark, temperatures dropped, and plants began to wither and die without sunlight to help them grow. It was as if the entire planet had been plunged into the deepest winter that had ever been. In this time of darkness and cold, many of the great dinosaurs could not survive. The giants who had ruled the earth for so long, who had seemed as permanent as mountains, slowly disappeared from the world like shadows fading when the last candle goes out. It was one of the saddest chapters in the history of life, a time when so many magnificent creatures had to say goodbye to the world they had called home for millions and millions of years. But in this story of endings, there was also a story of hope. The birds, those feathered descendants of dinosaurs, found ways to survive when so many others, could not. Their small size meant they needed less food to stay alive. Their ability to fly allowed them to search far and wide for whatever seeds and small creatures they could find. And perhaps most importantly, many birds had learned to eat seeds, those tiny packages of life that plants had wrapped up carefully to wait for better times. While the world above ground grew cold and dark, seeds lay sleeping in the soil like buried treasures, waiting patiently for the sun to return. The birds who could find and eat these seeds had a source of food that would last through the long, difficult months when almost nothing else could grow. It was as if nature had prepared a secret pantry for her flying children, hidden away for just such a time of need. Some scientists believe that the birds' warm blood also helped them survive. Unlike many reptiles who slowed down when temperatures dropped, birds could keep their bodies warm even when the world around them grew cold. Their feathers, those beautiful gifts that had first evolved to keep their dinosaur ancestors cozy, now became life-saving blankets that helped them weather the Earth's longest winter. Slowly, gently, Like the first shy flowers of spring, the dust began to settle and the sun began to shine through the clouds once more. Plants started to grow again, painting the world green with new life. And in this recovering world, the birds found themselves with opportunities they had never had before. With the giant dinosaurs gone, there were new places to live, new foods to eat, new ways to make a home in the world. The birds who survived began to spread and change like water flowing into every shape of container it finds. Some learned to wade in shallow waters, their legs growing long and elegant as they searched for fish and frogs. Others took to the open ocean, their wings becoming powerful enough to carry them on journeys that lasted for months. Some discovered the joy of eating nectar from flowers, their beaks becoming long and curved to reach deep into blossoms like tiny feathered keys designed to unlock nature's sweetest secrets. In forests around the world, birds learned to live among the branches in ways their ancestors had never imagined. Some became master builders, weaving nests so intricate and beautiful they looked like tiny works of art hanging in the trees. Others learned to store food for winter, hiding seeds and nuts in hundreds of secret places that only they could remember. The woodpeckers learned to tap, tap, tap on tree trunks, listening for the hollow sounds that meant insects were hiding inside, waiting to become a meal. And perhaps most wonderfully of all, birds began to sing. Not just simple calls to their mates or warnings of danger, but complex songs that seemed to carry joy itself on the morning air. Scientists believe that birdsong may have evolved partly to help establish territory and attract mates. But when you listen to a thrush singing at dawn or a nightingale pouring its heart out to the stars, it's hard not to think that something deeper is happening. It's as if the birds discovered that the air could carry not just their bodies, but their emotions too. Their happiness spilling out in melodies that make the whole world feel more alive. The songs of birds became the soundtrack to Earth's new beginning. Where once the world had echoed with the calls of giant dinosaurs, now it filled with trills and whistles, chirps and warbles, each species adding its own voice to a growing chorus that would never end. From the haunting call of a loon across a misty lake to the cheerful chatter of sparrows in a garden hedge, birds learned to paint the air with sound in ways that would have amazed their ancient ancestors. As millions of years passed like pages turning in a book, written by time itself, birds continued to evolve and adapt, becoming more diverse and specialized than anyone could have imagined. They learned to fly backwards like hummingbirds, to dive underwater like penguins, to soar without flapping like albatrosses riding the ocean winds. Some grew tiny like bee hummingbirds, weighing less than a penny, while others became giants like the ancient terror birds that stood 10 feet tall and ran across the grasslands like feathered racehorses. As we continue our gentle drift through time, imagine the world slowly warming and cooling again, like the planet taking long, deep breaths. Ice ages came and went like seasons on the grandest scale, and through each change, birds adapted and evolved, their forms shifting like clouds taking new shapes in an endless sky. Some birds learned to migrate, following invisible pathways written in starlight and magnetic fields, traveling thousands of miles between their summer and winter homes, as if the entire planet was their garden. The Arctic tern, one of nature's most dedicated travelers, learned to follow summer around the world, flying from Arctic to Antarctic and back again each year. Can you imagine such a journey? It's as if these graceful birds decided that winter was simply something they would never accept, choosing instead to chase the long, golden days across the entire earth. Their wings carry them over oceans and continents, over cities and wilderness, guided by ancient instincts that whisper directions older than any map. In the tropical forests, birds discovered the art of partnership with flowers. Hummingbirds, those tiny jewels of the air, learned to hover like helicopters made of feathers and light, their long beaks perfectly shaped to reach deep into blossoms for sweet nectar. As they fed, golden pollen dusted their foreheads and throats, turning them into flying messengers that carried life from flower to flower. It was a friendship written in evolution's own hand, where both bird and blossom benefited from their gentle dance together. Some birds chose a different path entirely, deciding that the ocean would be their sky. Penguins traded their ability to fly through air for the power to fly through water, their wings becoming flippers that could propel them through the waves like underwater rockets. Watching a penguin swim is like watching flight itself translated into a new language, every movement graceful and purposeful as they chase fish through the blue depths. On land, they waddle with the dignified awkwardness of creatures who have mastered one element so completely that they've forgotten how to be ordinary in another. The story of how birds learned to be intelligent is perhaps one of the most remarkable chapters in their long history. Crows and ravens, those dark poets of the sky, developed minds so clever they can solve puzzles, use tools, and even seem to hold grudges against people who have wronged them. They've learned to drop nuts in front of cars so the wheels will crack them open, and some have been seen sliding down snowy hills purely for the joy of it, like children playing in winter's first snowfall. Parrots, those colorful comedians of the tropical world, learned not just to mimic human speech, but to understand what some of their words mean. Alex, an African gray parrot who lived with scientist Irene Pepperberg, could count, identify colors and shapes, and even seemed to understand the concept of zero. When he died, his last words to Dr. Pepperberg were, "You be good, I love you." It's impossible to hear that story without feeling that something profound was happening. A meeting of minds across the vast space between species. But perhaps the most touching intelligence belongs to the birds who learn to grieve. Elephants aren't the only animals who mourn their dead. Magpies have been observed gathering around a fallen member of their group, calling softly as if saying goodbye. Some birds mate for life, and when one partner dies, the survivor may spend days calling for them, their voice carrying across the landscape like a song of loss that needs to be sung. In gardens and backyards around the world, birds learn to live alongside humans in ways both practical and magical. House wrens discovered that our mailboxes make excellent nesting spots, and robins learned that earthworms are easier to find in our well-watered lawns. Cardinals began visiting our bird feeders like neighbors stopping by for tea, their bright red feathers bringing a splash of wild beauty to even the most suburban morning. Some birds became so comfortable with humans that they learned to play. Ravens in Alaska have been seen sliding down snow-covered roofs again and again, apparently just for fun. In cities, crows learn the timing of traffic lights and drop nuts at crosswalks, knowing that cars will crack them open during red lights, then safely retrieve their meal when the light turns green and traffic stops. It's as if they've learned to make the entire city work for them, turning our urban world into their own clever playground. The relationship between birds and humans has always been complex and beautiful. We've learned from them in ways both practical and poetic. The Wright brothers studied the flight of birds before they built their first airplane, watching how wings could catch and ride the wind. Indigenous peoples around the world have long known that following migrating birds can lead to better hunting grounds or signal the changing seasons. Birds have been our teachers, our inspiration, and sometimes our friends. But birds have given us something even more precious than practical knowledge. They've given us wonder. There's something about watching a bird in flight that touches something deep in the human heart, maybe because flight represents freedom in its purest form. When we see a hawk circling lazily on thermal currents, or watch geese forming their perfect V across an autumn sky, we feel connected to something larger than ourselves, something that speaks of journeys and destinations beyond our earthbound lives. Some scientists believe that our love of birdsong helped inspire human music. The idea that air could carry melody, that sound could be shaped into beauty, may have come from listening to the thrushes and finches, the wrens and warblers that turned every dawn into a concert. Even today, many composers try to capture the essence of birdsong in their music, as if they're trying to translate the language of the sky into notes that human hearts can understand. As the world grew older and more complex, birds remained one of its most reliable sources of joy and mystery. No matter how complicated human life became, there were always birds outside the window, living their ancient lives with a grace that seemed to belong to a simpler, more beautiful world. They reminded us, and still remind us, that we share this planet with creatures whose ancestors once walked alongside dinosaurs, whose wings carry the memory of the first tentative glide from tree to tree in forests that existed before flowers had learned to bloom. And so here we are, at the end of our gentle journey through time, floating back to the present moment like a feather drifting down from the sky to land softly in your palm. Outside your window right now, as you listen to these words, dinosaurs are living still. They're perched on telephone wires, splashing in puddles, building nests in the eaves of houses, and filling the morning air with songs that echo back through 150 million years of unbroken melody. That robin on your lawn, with its bright red breast and cheerful hop, carries within its hollow bones the entire story we've just shared. Its heart beats with the same rhythm that once pulsed through the chest of Archaeopteryx as it glided between ancient trees. Its keen eyes see the world with the same sharpness that helped its theropod ancestors hunt in Jurassic forests. When it cocks its head to listen for earthworms beneath the grass, it's using instincts refined over countless generations, each one a link in an unbroken chain stretching back to the very beginning of this tale. The hummingbird that visits your garden feeder moves its wings in figure eights, beating them so fast they blur into silver whispers. But those wings remember the first tentative flaps of dinosaurs learning to leap just a little higher, to catch just a little more air. Every movement is a miracle of evolution, a solution to the puzzle of flight that nature spent millions of years solving with infinite patience and breathtaking creativity. Even the pigeons that walk through city squares, those humble birds that many people barely notice, are living links to an age when giants ruled the earth. They navigate using magnetic fields we can't even sense, remember complex routes across urban landscapes, and recognize themselves in mirrors. They're not just survivors of the Great Extinction. They're triumphant inheritors of a legacy that includes some of the most magnificent creatures that ever lived. Think for a moment about the extraordinary journey that brought us to this place. It began with the first simple feathers that grew to keep small dinosaurs warm on cool prehistoric nights. It continued through millions of years of tiny changes, each one so small it would have been invisible to any observer, but each one crucial to the magnificent transformation that was slowly unfolding. The first hesitant glide became confident flight. Sharp teeth gave way to specialized beaks. Scales transformed into the infinite variety of feathers that now paint the sky in every color imaginable. But perhaps the most beautiful part of this story is that it's still being written. Evolution didn't stop when birds learned to fly. It continues today, every day, in subtle ways that we're only beginning to understand. Birds are still adapting, still learning, still finding new ways to live in a world that keeps changing around them. City birds are learning to sing louder to be heard over traffic noise. Some species are shifting their migration patterns as the climate changes. Others are discovering that humans can be partners as well as obstacles, finding new opportunities in our gardens, parks, and wild spaces. The story of how dinosaurs became birds is really a story about time itself, about the way small changes can accumulate into transformations so complete they seem almost magical. It's about patience and persistence, about life's incredible ability to find new ways forward even in the face of catastrophe. It's about beauty emerging from the most unlikely places, about songs rising from silence, about the gift of flight being earned through millions of years of practice and perseverance. When you see a bird tomorrow, whether it's a common sparrow or a magnificent eagle, a tiny wren or a graceful swan, remember that you're looking at a dinosaur that learned to dance with the wind. You're witnessing the living legacy of creatures that survived when giants could not, that found ways to thrive in a world turned upside down, that turned the sky itself into their home and highway. There's something deeply comforting about this connection between past and present, between the ancient world of dinosaurs and the birds that share our modern world. It reminds us that we're part of something much larger and older than our own brief lives, part of a story that began long before we arrived and will continue long after we're gone. The birds carry this story in their wings, in their songs, in their very being, connecting us to deep time and reminding us of the incredible creativity and resilience of life itself. So as you drift toward sleep tonight, or as you move through your day tomorrow, listen for the songs outside your window. Watch for the flash of wings across the sky. Notice the way birds move through the world with such grace and purpose, as if they remember something important that we've forgotten. They are living poetry, breathing music, feathered bridges between the world that was and the world that is. And in their flight, in their songs, in the simple miracle of their existence, we find one of the most beautiful truths in all of science, that nothing is ever truly lost, that endings can become beginnings, and that sometimes the most magnificent transformations happen so slowly, so gently, that they feel less like change and more like an ancient promise finally being kept. Rest well now, knowing that the sky outside your window is full of dinosaurs who learned to sing, who traded their earthbound kingdom for the infinite blue realm of air and light and endless, soaring freedom. Their story is our story, too. A reminder that life always finds a way forward, always discovers new forms of beauty, and always, always keeps the most wonderful surprises for those patient enough to watch and listen and wonder. Sweet dreams, gentle souls, the birds will still be there when you wake.